They were celebrating my death in the hospital cafeteria while I was supposed to be unconscious upstairs. When I walked in on that conversation, I finally understood what my husband had been planning for 2 years. But let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 6 months earlier, I thought I had the perfect retirement. Michael and I, married 32 years, finally enjoying the $12 million estate I'd built. That Tuesday morning, I was watering roses when the chest pain hit. Not dramatic, just a strange tightness that made me sit down. But something felt wrong. "Michael," I called, voice shakier than expected. He appeared from the garage, salt and pepper beard making him look distinguished. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I think I need to go to the hospital." Dr. Richard Hayes, the cardiologist with silver hair and expensive suit, delivered concerning news, with gentle authority. "Mrs. Cameron, the tests show irregularities in your heart rhythm. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but we need to monitor this." But here's what struck me as odd, though I didn't recognize it then. When Dr. Hayes discussed my condition, he kept glancing at Michael, seeking approval. Michael squeezed my hand. "She's been under tremendous stress since we lost our daughter Emma last year." The grief was real. Emma's accident had shattered us both. But how Michael used her death to explain my fragile state made something cold settle in my chest. Over the next weeks, tests multiplied. Each appointment brought new concerns. Michael accompanied me everywhere, taking notes, managing medications. "You're so lucky to have such an attentive husband," nurses would say. I was lucky, wasn't I? Medical bills arrived for procedures I didn't remember scheduling. When I asked Michael, he'd pat my shoulder. "Don't worry about paperwork, sweetheart. Insurance covers everything. You focus on getting better." That should have been comforting. Instead, it made me feel erased. Everyone suddenly treated me like I was fragile. Michael finished my sentences during appointments. The pharmacy called him about my prescriptions. Even our financial advisor started including Michael in calls about our accounts that had always been solely mine. "Given Beth's health situation," I overheard Michael telling James, "we should discuss some practical planning." Practical planning? The phrase made my stomach twist. 3 weeks later, Michael suggested meeting our estate attorney. "Just to make sure everything's organized," he said casually. "These things get complicated." Patricia Mills had handled our legal affairs 15 years. She welcomed us with professional warmth, a leather portfolio already prepared. Before we'd even discussed what we needed. "Michael explained you've been having health concerns," she said, spreading documents across her desk like dealing cards. "I've prepared updated documents. Given recent developments, Michael suggested we streamline the estate structure. Transfer assets into joint ownership with rights of survivorship," she explained. "Eliminates probate complications and ensures immediate access for medical expenses." The words sounded reasonable. But staring at documents that would transfer my $12 million estate, money I'd earned through 28 years building my business, something felt fundamentally wrong. "I'd like to review these at home first," I said. Michael's hand covered mine. "Of course, sweetheart, but attorney fees are adding up, and Dr. Hayes wants to discuss treatment options tomorrow." Patricia nodded. Given the medical timeline Michael described, sooner is better for asset protection. Medical timeline. What medical timeline? I signed because my husband of 32 years held my hand and said it was right. Because our attorney presented everything as routine. Because 3 professionals convinced me I was sicker than I felt. Driving home, a memory surfaced that made my hand shake. During my consulting years, I'd worked with insurance companies on fraud detection. The most common schemes involved life insurance and manufactured medical emergencies. The pattern: create documentation, manipulate vulnerable patients, accelerate estate planning. Then, "Are you okay?" Michael asked, noticing my white knuckles. "Fine," I whispered. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. The memory wasn't just about fraud schemes. It was about my own professional expertise in detecting them. For 28 years, I'd been one of the most successful insurance fraud investigators in the state. I'd built my fortune recognizing exactly the pattern now surrounding my life. That night, staring at the ceiling, I realized two terrifying things. First, my husband was systematically stealing my life's work. Second, I probably wasn't his first wife. But Michael didn't know he'd made a critical mistake. He'd handed documents to someone who'd spent nearly 3 decades recognizing every red flag in his plan. The question wasn't whether I could stop him. The question was whether I could stop him before he stopped me permanently. The next morning, I woke up with that strange clarity that comes after a sleepless night of terrible realizations. Michael was already downstairs making coffee, humming softly like he did every morning for 32 years. But now that humming sounded different, like someone pleased with himself. "Sleep well?" he asked, kissing my forehead with the same tenderness that had made me fall in love with him decades ago. "Fine," I lied, accepting the coffee mug, my favorite, the one Sarah had given me for Mother's Day. But as I sipped, my newly awakened professional instincts kicked in. Michael never made my coffee anymore. I always made coffee while he read the paper. This small change felt significant. "Dr. Hayes called," Michael said, settling across from me with his own mug. "He wants to see us today. Apparently, the latest test results came back." Test results? I didn't remember taking any tests yesterday. "What tests?" Michael's expression shifted to that patient look reserved for confused elderly people. "The blood work, sweetheart. Don't you remember? The nurse came by Tuesday. But Tuesday I was home alone all day, working in my garden. No nurse had visited." "I think I'd remember." "Beth," Michael interrupted gently. "You've been having some memory issues lately. Dr. Hayes mentioned this might happen." Memory issues. When had Dr. Hayes mentioned that? And why was Michael always the one receiving medical information about my condition? 2 hours later, we sat in Dr. Hayes' office while he delivered more concerning news with that same practiced authority. "Mrs. Cameron, your cardiac enzyme levels show some elevation. Combined with the stress-related symptoms, we need to discuss more aggressive monitoring." I leaned forward. "What specific enzyme levels?" Dr. Hayes glanced at Michael before answering. "The troponin levels, primarily. Nothing immediately dangerous, but concerning given your situation." My situation. Not my condition. My situation. "I'd like copies of all my test results," I said. "Of course." Dr. Hayes smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. "Patricia can get those for you." But when we stopped at the desk, Patricia, a young woman with bleached hair who definitely wasn't a medical professional, told me the results would take a few days to process. Processing test results that had already been analyzed made no sense. Driving home, I paid attention to things I'd been too grief-stricken to notice before. Michael took 3 phone calls, each time stepping outside to talk privately. When he returned from the 3rd call, his expression was troubled. "Bad news, sweetheart. Insurance is asking for additional documentation about your condition. Apparently there's some question about pre-existing conditions." Pre-existing conditions, for a heart problem that had appeared 3 weeks ago. That afternoon, a woman arrived at our door claiming to be from the insurance company. Mid-30s, professionally dressed, with credentials that looked official at first glance. "Mrs. Cameron, I'm Sandra Mitchell from Consolidated Health Services. I need to verify some information about your recent claims." She had a clipboard and knew details about my condition that seemed impossible for an insurance investigator to know. But something about her felt wrong. "What's your supervisor's name?" I asked. "Mr. Davidson," she replied without hesitation. "Would you like his direct number?" I would, actually. But when I called the number later, it went straight to a generic voicemail that could belong to anyone. That evening, Michael suggested we update our will. Just to be safe, he said over dinner. Patricia Mills thinks we should revise a few things given your health situation. What kinds of revisions? Nothing major. Beneficiary updates, trust restructuring, the usual adjustments when someone's medical status changes. But my medical status hadn't changed dramatically. At least, it didn't feel like it had. Michael, I said carefully, do you remember your first wife? Catherine? His fork paused halfway to his mouth. Why would you ask about Catherine? Just curious. How did she die again? Heart condition, he said quietly. Very similar to yours, actually. The stress just became too much for her. Catherine had died 12 years ago, 2 years before Michael and I married. Heart condition, sudden deterioration, natural death. But now, with my professional instincts fully awakened, I wondered about that word. Natural. That night, I waited until Michael was asleep before carefully extracting myself from bed. In my home office, the one Michael never entered, I opened my laptop and began researching. Beth Cameron, deceased at 58. The obituary was brief. Too brief for someone who'd supposedly lived a full life. But what made me pause was the timeline. Catherine's first heart episode happened in January. She died in July. 6 months. I'd had my first episode 3 weeks ago, which meant, if there was a pattern, I needed to figure out what was really happening before summer arrived. But first, I had to navigate tomorrow's appointment with Dr. Hayes, knowing now that nothing about my medical care felt legitimate. The question was, what exactly were they planning to do to me? And more importantly, how could I stop them when I didn't even know who they really were? I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Instead, I sat at my computer, using skills I'd developed over 28 years to dig deeper into Michael's past. What I found made me realize I'd stumbled onto something much bigger than one man killing his wives. Beth Cameron wasn't Michael's first wife to die of a mysterious heart condition. Margaret Stevens, married to Michael from 1987 to 1992, died at age 46, heart failure, insurance payout, $2 million. Susan Rodriguez, married to Michael from 1995 to 2001, died at age 51, cardiac arrest, insurance payout, $1 million. 3 wives, 3 heart conditions, 3 substantial insurance payouts. But what really caught my attention was the pattern. Each marriage lasted approximately 5 to 7 years. Each wife died within 6 months of showing any signs of heart problems, and each wife's estate was significantly larger than the last. Michael wasn't just a serial killer. He was a professional widowmaker. By 5 a.m., I had a plan. I called my stepdaughter Sarah in London, knowing it would be 10 a.m. there and she'd be awake. Beth, is everything okay? It's the middle of the night there. Sarah, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound crazy, but I need you to trust me. I explained everything. The medical manipulation, the financial documents, the insurance patterns, Catherine's death, the DNR consultation scheduled for this morning. Oh my God, Sarah whispered. Beth, you have to get out of there right now. I can't just disappear. He's too sophisticated. He has Dr. Hayes, the attorney, fake insurance people. If I run, he'll just report me as confused and missing. They'll bring me back. Then what do you do? I'm going to that consultation this morning, but I'm going to record everything. That's insane. It's the only way to get evidence. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. If something happens to me, take this information to the FBI. Promise me. After I hung up with Sarah, I prepared. Hidden recording device, emergency contact list, evidence files saved to cloud storage. I even wrote a letter explaining everything just in case. At 7:30 a.m., Michael found me in the kitchen, fully dressed and ready to go. You're up early, he said, but something in his eyes looked relieved. Feeling better about today's appointment? Actually, yes, I lied. I think you're right. It's better to be prepared. The drive to the hospital was almost normal. Michael held my hand, made small talk about our weekend plans, acted like the loving husband he'd been for 10 years. But I noticed things now. How he knew exactly which entrance to use, how the parking attendant waved us through without checking our appointment, how the elevator took us to a floor I'd never been to before. Mr. and Mrs. Cameron? A young man in scrubs approached us. I'm Kevin, Dr. Hayes' assistant. We're ready for you. The consultation room was small, sterile, and windowless. Dr. Hayes waited with several documents spread across the table and a woman I didn't recognize. Mrs. Cameron, thank you for coming in so early. I know this is difficult, but given the acceleration in your condition, we need to discuss immediate care decisions. Acceleration in my condition. Yesterday, I felt fine. This is Linda Morrison from the hospital's patient advocacy office, Dr. Hayes continued, gesturing to the woman. She's here to ensure you understand all your options. Linda Morrison smiled warmly, but her credentials looked as fake as Sandra Mitchell's had. Mrs. Cameron, I know this is overwhelming, but signing a DNR order is actually a gift you give your family. It prevents unnecessary suffering and allows for a peaceful transition. Peaceful transition. They were already talking about my death like it was inevitable. What exactly does the DNR cover? I asked, secretly activating the recording device in my purse. Do not resuscitate means that if your heart stops, we won't attempt CPR or other aggressive interventions, Dr. Hayes explained. Given your current cardiac status, these interventions would likely be unsuccessful and would only cause pain. But what if there's a medical emergency during a routine procedure? Dr. Hayes and Linda exchanged a glance. Well, that's where the broader comfort care directive comes in, Linda said. It's designed to ensure you're never subjected to futile medical interventions. She slid papers across the table. The language was complex, but I caught the key phrases. Advance directive. Comfort care only. No extraordinary measures. Do not transport to intensive care. This wasn't just a DNR. This was a comprehensive let her die order. I'd like my stepdaughter to review these documents, I said. Of course, Dr. Hayes said smoothly. But Sarah is in London, and your condition requires immediate attention. Michael has medical power of attorney, so he can sign on your behalf if needed. Medical power of attorney. When had I signed that? Actually, I said, I'm feeling much clearer today. I think I'd prefer to sign myself. I signed the documents because I needed them to think I was compliant. But I also made sure to ask specific questions that would be captured on my recording. So this means if something happens during my heart catheterization next week, you won't try to save me? The procedure is very safe, Mrs. Cameron, Dr. Hayes assured me. But yes, if complications arise, we would focus on comfort rather than aggressive intervention. Heart catheterization. This was the first I'd heard of any procedure next week. When did we schedule that? Yesterday afternoon, Michael said gently. Remember, we discussed it after your dizzy spell. I hadn't had any dizzy spell yesterday, but I nodded like I remembered. After we signed everything, Michael walked me to the car with his arm around my waist like I was fragile. See? That wasn't so bad. Now we can stop worrying and focus on enjoying our time together. Our time together. Like it was limited. During the drive home, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. I had everything recorded. Their conspiracy was on tape. Dr. Hayes admitting the procedure could be dangerous. Linda Morrison discussing comfort care only. Michael confirming medical procedures I'd never agreed to. This was enough evidence to stop them and expose the whole operation. But when we got home, I discovered how wrong I was. Michael's phone rang as soon as we walked through the door. Really? He said into the phone, his voice concerned. When did that happen? He hung up and turned to me with an expression of deep worry. "Bad news, sweetheart. That was the hospital. There's been some kind of system breach. Patient records, recorded conversations, everything from this morning has been corrupted." My blood turned to ice. Corrupted? Computer virus, apparently. They're very sorry, but all digital records from today need to be recreated from memory. The recording device in my purse felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. They're asking patients to come back this afternoon to re-sign documents, just to make sure everything's properly documented. This afternoon, before I could contact anyone or escape. That's when I understood the real scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just Michael with a corrupt doctor and fake attorney. This was an organized system. They had people in hospital administration. They could manipulate digital records. They had backup plans for witnesses and evidence. They weren't just planning to kill me. They were planning to erase any proof that they'd done it. But what they didn't know was that my 28 years of experience had taught me never to rely on just one piece of evidence. While they thought they'd eliminated my recording, I'd already uploaded everything to cloud storage, sent copies to Sarah, and activated emergency protocols I'd established decades ago for exactly this kind of situation. The only question was whether my backup plans would work fast enough, because I was pretty sure I didn't have until this afternoon. I was pretty sure they were planning to kill me in the next few hours. The next morning, I woke to find Michael already gone. A note on the kitchen counter said he'd left early for a business meeting and would pick me up at noon for my follow-up appointment with Dr. Hayes. But it was only 7 a.m. What business meeting started that early? I made coffee and opened my laptop, determined to dig deeper into what I'd started researching last night. If there was a pattern with Catherine, I needed to understand it completely. What I found made my blood run cold. Beth Cameron wasn't Michael's first wife to die of heart problems. Margaret Stevens, married to Michael Cameron from 1987 to 1992, died at 46 from sudden cardiac arrest. Insurance payout, $2 million. Susan Rodriguez, married to Michael Cameron from 1995 to 2001, died at 51 from heart failure during a routine medical procedure. Insurance payout, $1 million. Beth Cameron, married to Michael from 2005 to 2010, died at 58 from cardiac complications. Insurance payout, $8 million. 3 wives, 3 heart conditions, 3 insurance payouts totaling over $5 million. But the pattern was worse than I'd imagined. Each wife had been healthy until approximately 6 months before death. Each had developed heart problems that required extensive medical monitoring. Each had signed estate documents transferring assets to Michael within weeks of their first cardiac episode. And each had died during what should have been routine medical care. I printed everything and started a timeline. Margaret, healthy until January 1992, died July 1992. Susan, healthy until September 2000, died February 2001. Catherine, healthy until January 2010, died July 2010. The time frame was consistent, 6 months from first episode to death. My first episode had been 4 weeks ago, which meant I had less than 5 months to live unless I figured out how to stop this. But the most terrifying discovery was yet to come. I found Michael's marriage license applications in the public records. The pattern of how he'd met each wife was identical. Single women with substantial assets. Recent losses that made them vulnerable. Whirlwind courtships lasting less than a year. He was a professional predator who specialized in wealthy widows and divorced women. That's when I understood why Michael had seemed so perfect when we'd met. He'd studied me, researched my financial situation, my recent divorce, my emotional vulnerabilities. Our chance meeting at the charity fundraiser hadn't been chance at all. It had been a hunting expedition. The phone rang, startling me from my research. "Mrs. Cameron? This is Dr. Hayes' office. We need to reschedule your appointment today to 10 a.m. instead of noon. The doctor has an emergency surgery this afternoon." Emergency surgery. But Michael had said our appointment was at noon, and he wouldn't be back until then. Can I reschedule for tomorrow instead? I'm sorry, but Dr. Hayes is leaving town tomorrow for a medical conference. Today is the only option. The only option. Everything with these people was always the only option. Fine. I'll be there at 10. I hung up and immediately called Michael's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called his office. They said he was in meetings all morning and couldn't be reached. They were separating us. I grabbed my purse, keys, and the printed research and headed for the door. But as I reached for the handle, I noticed something that made my heart race. The security system panel showed that someone had disarmed the house alarm at 3:47 a.m. Michael had left the house in the middle of the night and hadn't told me. I checked the garage. His car was gone, but there were fresh oil stains on the garage floor where a second vehicle had been parked. Someone else had been here last night. Driving to the hospital, I called my stepdaughter Sarah in London. Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. I'm about to go into a medical appointment that I think might be dangerous. What do you mean dangerous? I've discovered that Michael has been married to 3 other women who all died of heart problems. Each of them had substantial assets that went to Michael after they died. Oh my God. Beth, don't go to that appointment. Come straight to the airport. I can't. If I disappear now, they'll report me as mentally incompetent and have me brought back. I need evidence of what they're planning. Then I'm calling the police. And tell them what? That my husband might be planning to kill me because his previous wives died of heart disease? They'll think I'm having a breakdown. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What do you want me to do? If something happens to me, take everything I've emailed you to the FBI. There's a pattern here that goes beyond just Michael. At the hospital, I was directed to a floor I'd never been to before. The elevator required a key card to access it, but the security guard waved me through like he'd been expecting me. The hallway was eerily quiet. No nurses, no patients, no normal hospital activity. Dr. Hayes greeted me in a small conference room with 2 people I didn't recognize. Mrs. Cameron, thank you for coming in early. I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Wells from the cardiac surgery department and Mr. Davidson from the hospital's risk management team. Risk management. Why would I need risk management for a routine follow-up? I'm afraid we have some difficult news, Dr. Hayes continued. Your latest test results show significant deterioration. We need to discuss immediate intervention options. What test results? I haven't had any tests since last week. Dr. Wells spoke up. The blood work we took yesterday shows dangerous enzyme levels. Without immediate surgery, you could have a massive cardiac event within days. Yesterday, I was home alone all day. No one had taken blood work. I think there's been a mistake, I said carefully. Mrs. Cameron, Mr. Davidson interjected. We understand this is frightening. That's why we've prepared comprehensive care directives to ensure you receive appropriate treatment. He slid papers across the table. Advance directives. Do not resuscitate orders. Comfort care, only instructions. But these weren't the same documents I'd been shown before. These were much more extensive. What exactly does this authorize? I asked. It ensures that if you experience cardiac arrest during surgery, we won't subject you to painful and futile resuscitation attempts, Dr. Wells explained. And the surgery is? Emergency cardiac catheterization with possible stent placement. We need to perform it this afternoon. This afternoon. While Michael was conveniently unreachable. That's when everything clicked into place with terrifying clarity. They weren't just planning to let me die during a medical emergency. They were planning to create the medical emergency. The cardiac catheterization was going to be the method they used to kill me, just like they'd killed Margaret, Susan, and Catherine. And the DNR order I was about to sign would make it completely legal. I stared at the DNR documents, my mind racing with 28 years of professional experience that these people had no idea I possessed. Because what Dr. Hayes, Dr. Wells, and Mr. Davidson didn't know was that I'd spent nearly 3 decades investigating exactly this type of healthcare fraud. I was one of the most successful insurance fraud investigators in the state. I'd built my $12 million fortune by recognizing patterns, documenting evidence, and exposing systematic healthcare scams, and I was looking at the most sophisticated medical murder operation I'd ever encountered. "I'd like to review these documents carefully," I said, buying time while my investigative training kicked into full gear. "Of course," Dr. Hayes said, "but given the urgency of your condition, we really need your signature within the next hour." 1 hour. They were rushing me exactly the way every fraud operation rushes their victims. "Could I have a few minutes alone to read through everything?" The 3 exchanged glances. "Certainly. We'll be right outside if you have questions." The moment they left, I activated the recording app on my phone and began applying every technique I'd learned in 28 years of fraud investigation. First, I photographed every document, every signature line, every piece of evidence in that room. Then I opened the cloud storage app I'd used throughout my career and uploaded everything to multiple secure servers. Next, I activated the emergency protocol I'd established decades ago for high-risk investigations. I sent a coded text message to Detective Sarah Martinez, my former colleague in the Financial Crimes Unit. Code read: healthcare fraud in progress. Location: Metropolitan General Hospital, Floor 7, Conference Room B, immediate backup needed. Then I called the one person who could mobilize resources faster than anyone else. FBI Financial Crimes Division, Agent Thompson speaking. "Agent Thompson, this is Elizabeth Cameron, former senior insurance fraud investigator, State Department of Insurance. Badge number 2847. I need immediate assistance for a healthcare fraud and murder conspiracy in progress." "Mrs. Cameron, I remember your work on the Riverside medical case. What's your situation?" "I'm currently at Metropolitan General Hospital being pressured to sign DNR orders as part of what appears to be a systematic medical murder operation. I've documented evidence of at least 3 previous victims, all wives of the same individual, with insurance payouts totaling over $5 million. Are you in immediate danger?" "They're planning to perform emergency cardiac surgery on me this afternoon. Based on the pattern, I believe this is their murder method. We'll have agents there within 30 minutes. Can you delay signing anything until then?" "I'll try. But, Agent Thompson, this operation involves hospital administration, multiple physicians, and sophisticated document fraud. This isn't just one corrupt doctor." "Understood. Keep this line open and stay in that room if possible." I hung up and immediately called my insurance company's fraud hotline. "Consolidated Insurance Fraud Division. This is Supervisor Rebecca Walsh." "Rebecca, this is Beth Cameron, former senior investigator. I need you to put an immediate hold on policy 847-992-4651 and flag it for suspicious activity." "Beth? I thought you'd retired. What's going on?" "Someone's trying to murder me for my life insurance, and they're using the same method they've used to kill at least 3 other women. I need you to pull the files on Margaret Stevens, Susan Rodriguez, and Catherine Cameron, all married to Michael Cameron at time of death." "Jesus, are you safe?" "For now. But Rebecca, I need you to contact the National Insurance Crime Bureau immediately. This is a multi-state operation involving healthcare professionals, legal document fraud, and systematic murder for insurance payouts. I'm making the calls now. What else do you need?" "Run Michael Cameron's name through the fraud database. Check for any other suspicious claims or policy applications. And Rebecca, if something happens to me in the next few hours, everything I've sent to cloud storage needs to go directly to the FBI." After hanging up, I used my phone to access the medical records database I still had clearance for through my professional associations. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. Margaret Stevens, cardiac catheterization procedure, complications during surgery, died on operating table despite extensive resuscitation efforts. Susan Rodriguez, cardiac catheterization procedure, Unexpected reaction to contrast dye, cardiac arrest, died despite heroic medical intervention. Beth Cameron, cardiac catheterization procedure, equipment malfunction, cardiac arrest, died despite immediate resuscitation attempts. 3 women, same procedure, same fatal complications. But here's what the medical records also showed. Each woman had been given double the normal dose of contrast dye, which could easily cause cardiac arrest in someone with a supposedly weakened heart. They weren't just creating medical emergencies. They were poisoning their victims during legitimate medical procedures, knowing that the DNR orders would prevent any real attempt at resuscitation. It was the perfect murder method, medically plausible, legally covered, and nearly impossible to detect unless you knew exactly what to look for. But I knew what to look for, because I'd spent 28 years learning how to catch people who thought they were smarter than the system. The door opened, and Dr. Hayes returned with his co-conspirators. "Mrs. Cameron, we really do need to proceed. Your husband has given permission for the emergency surgery, and we have an operating room reserved." Michael had given permission, without talking to me. For surgery, I didn't need based on test results that didn't exist. "Actually," I said, standing up with the confidence of someone who'd just activated professional networks they didn't know existed, "I think we need to wait." "Wait?" Dr. Wells looked alarmed. "Mrs. Cameron, your condition is critical. My condition is fine, but your operation isn't." I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen displaying my active call with FBI Agent Thompson. "Agent Thompson, you're on speaker. Please tell these medical professionals what resources are currently en route to this hospital." Agent Thompson's voice filled the room. "FBI agents, financial crimes investigators, and medical fraud specialists will arrive at Metropolitan General Hospital within 15 minutes to investigate allegations of healthcare fraud and conspiracy to commit murder." The color drained from all 3 faces. "There's been some mistake," Dr. Hayes stammered. "The only mistake," I said, "was assuming that a woman grieving her daughter's death would be too vulnerable to recognize a systematic murder operation." I looked directly at Dr. Hayes. "What you didn't know is that I spent 28 years investigating healthcare fraud. I've seen operations like this before, but never one this sophisticated." Then I looked at Dr. Wells. "The cardiac catheterization procedure you're planning? I know about the contrast dye overdose. I know how you killed Margaret Stevens, Susan Rodriguez, and Beth Cameron." Finally, I turned to Mr. Davidson. "And I know about the insurance policies, the estate transfers, and the systematic targeting of wealthy widows." The room was completely silent. "The FBI is tracking multiple insurance payouts, the Financial Crimes Unit is investigating the estate fraud, and medical fraud specialists are reviewing every procedure you've performed in the past 15 years. I gathered my documents and headed for the door. "Oh, and gentlemen, you might want to call your lawyers, because this isn't just healthcare fraud anymore." I paused at the door and looked back at them. "This is capital murder. Multiple counts." I walked out of that conference room and straight into the most satisfying moment of my professional career. The hospital hallway was swarming with federal agents, financial crimes investigators, and medical fraud specialists. Agent Thompson met me at the elevator with Detective Sarah Martinez and 3 other professionals I recognized from my decades in fraud investigation. "Mrs. Cameron, excellent work. We've secured the entire floor and detained all parties involved." Through the conference room's glass window, I could see Dr. Hayes, Dr. Wells, and Mr. Davidson being read their rights by FBI agents. "How extensive is this operation?" Detective Martinez asked. "Much bigger than just Michael and a few corrupt medical professionals," I said, pulling out my phone to show them the evidence I'd gathered. "This is a sophisticated network that's been operating for at least 15 years. Agent Thompson reviewed my documentation on his tablet. 3 confirmed murders, over $5 million in insurance payouts, systematic estate fraud, and hospital administration involvement. This is going to require coordination across multiple agencies. Within 2 hours, the justice cascade was in full motion. Dr. Richard Hayes was arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, healthcare fraud, and insurance fraud. His medical license was immediately suspended, and investigators discovered he'd been falsifying patient records for over a decade. Dr. Patricia Wells was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and healthcare fraud. The medical board launched an investigation into every cardiac procedure she'd performed in the past 5 years. Mr. Davidson, who turned out to be Michael's brother-in-law rather than a legitimate hospital employee, was charged with impersonating a healthcare professional, conspiracy to commit murder, and document fraud. But the biggest arrests were yet to come. Sandra Mitchell, the fake insurance investigator, was actually a licensed practical nurse who'd been fired from 3 different hospitals for falsifying patient records. She was arrested at her apartment with forged credentials from 6 different insurance companies. Patricia Mills, our estate attorney, was arrested at her office while attempting to shred documents related to estate transfers for 12 different clients. The State Bar Association discovered she'd been using her position to facilitate systematic financial fraud for over 8 years. Michael was arrested at what he claimed was a business meeting, but turned out to be a strategy session with 2 other men who'd been running similar operations in different states. The business meeting was actually a coordination meeting for a multi-state murder for insurance network. Agent Thompson briefed me on the scope as federal investigators worked through the night. Elizabeth, your investigation broke open what we're calling the largest systematic healthcare fraud and murder conspiracy in recent history. We've identified at least 12 victims across 4 states, with insurance payouts exceeding $20 million. 12 victims, $20 million. The network includes corrupt physicians, hospital administrators, estate attorneys, insurance professionals, and what appears to be a recruitment system for targeting wealthy single women. Detective Martinez added, "We found Michael's files, detailed psychological profiles, financial assessments, and manipulation strategies for dozens of potential targets. You weren't just a victim, Beth. You were part of a systematic hunting operation." The insurance industry response was swift and comprehensive. Consolidated Insurance, where I'd worked for over 2 decades, immediately flagged hundreds of potentially suspicious claims connected to the network. Rebecca Walsh led a task force that identified patterns stretching back 15 years. The National Insurance Crime Bureau launched a comprehensive investigation into healthcare fraud patterns, using my case as a model for systematic detection protocols. 3 major insurance companies established new verification requirements for high-value life insurance claims involving cardiac procedures. The medical community's response was equally decisive. Metropolitan General Hospital fired 4 administrators, implemented new security protocols, and established independent oversight for all cardiac procedures. The state medical board suspended 12 physicians pending investigation into their connections with the fraud network. The American College of Cardiology issued new guidelines for cardiac catheterization procedures, including mandatory independent verification for high-risk patients. But perhaps most importantly, the legal system delivered comprehensive justice. Michael Cameron was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, systematic insurance fraud, estate fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and operating a criminal enterprise. Federal prosecutors were seeking the death penalty. The estate attorney, Patricia Mills, was disbarred and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for her role in systematic estate fraud, affecting dozens of families. Dr. Hayes received a life sentence without parole after pleading guilty to 4 counts of murder and agreeing to testify against other network members. The fake insurance investigator Sandra Mitchell received 25 years for her role in the murders and fraud conspiracy. Even hospital administrators who'd facilitated the operation faced criminal charges and civil liability. But the justice cascade extended beyond just criminal penalties. The families of Margaret Stevens, Susan Rodriguez, and Catherine Cameron filed wrongful death lawsuits that resulted in multi-million-dollar settlements from the hospitals, insurance companies, and professional organizations involved. The insurance companies not only returned all fraudulent payouts, but paid additional damages for their failure to detect the systematic pattern. Medical malpractice insurers faced hundreds of millions in liability for the physicians and hospitals that had participated in the conspiracy. Professional licensing boards across multiple states implemented new oversight protocols to prevent similar systematic abuse. 6 months after my investigation began, I stood in a federal courtroom watching Michael Cameron receive 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The judge's words echoed through the packed courtroom. This court has never seen such systematic, calculated evil disguised as medical care and personal relationships. The defendant's actions represent the worst possible violation of trust between spouses, between patients and healthcare providers, and between citizens and the institutions designed to protect them. As Michael was led away in chains, he looked at me with the kind of hatred reserved for people who've destroyed carefully laid plans. But I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction from revenge, but the deep professional pride that comes from using decades of expertise to protect not just yourself, but countless future victims. Because the systematic changes we'd implemented meant that this kind of healthcare fraud and murder conspiracy would be much harder to execute in the future. And that was worth more than any personal revenge could ever be. 2 years later, I stood at the podium of the National Insurance Crime Bureau's annual conference, looking out at an audience of fraud investigators, healthcare professionals, and law enforcement officers from across the country. My hair was silver now, and I'd gained back the 20 pounds I'd lost during those terrifying months when Michael was slowly poisoning me. But more importantly, I'd reclaimed something I hadn't realized I'd lost: my sense of purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, healthcare fraud isn't just about money, I began. It's about the systematic violation of the most vulnerable moments in people's lives. The presentation I was about to give had been requested by agencies in 12 states. It was called The Cameron Case: Systematic Healthcare Murder and How Professional Expertise Saved Lives. But before I shared the professional lessons, I needed to share the personal ones. 3 years ago, I thought I was living a perfect retirement. $12 million in assets, a beautiful home, and a loving husband of 10 years. I had no idea I was actually the target of the most sophisticated murder conspiracy I've ever encountered. I clicked to the first slide. Photos of Margaret Stevens, Susan Rodriguez, Catherine Cameron, and myself. 4 women. 1 predator. A systematic murder operation that nearly succeeded because it exploited our most basic human needs: trust, love, and hope for medical healing. The audience was completely silent. These were professionals who'd seen every type of fraud imaginable, but systematic murder disguised as healthcare was something different. The hardest lesson I learned about people is this: evil becomes most dangerous when it disguises itself as care. Michael Cameron didn't just steal money. He weaponized love, trust, and medical vulnerability to commit the perfect murders. I paused, looking out at the faces of investigators who would use this knowledge to protect future victims. But here's what I want you to understand. The reason I survived wasn't luck. It was because 28 years of professional experience had taught me to recognize patterns that others couldn't see. Click. The next slide showed the investigation timeline. Every single red flag in Michael's operation was something I'd encountered in previous healthcare fraud cases: the false medical tests, the rushed decision-making, the systematic isolation from family and friends, the financial documents that appeared overnight. A fraud investigator in the front row raised her hand. How did you maintain objectivity when you were personally involved? I almost didn't, I admitted. Grief from losing my daughter made me vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation Michael specialized in. But professional training runs deeper than personal emotion. When survival is threatened, expertise becomes instinct. I clicked to the next slide. the systematic changes that had resulted from our investigation. This case led to new protocols across multiple industries. Insurance companies now flag rapid policy changes following cardiac diagnoses. Hospitals require independent verification for high-risk cardiac procedures. Estate attorneys face enhanced oversight for emergency document signings. But the most important slide was next: the lives saved. In the 2 years since Michael's network was exposed, these new protocols have prevented at least 37 suspicious healthcare deaths and saved insurance companies over $50 million in fraudulent payouts. After my presentation, I spent hours answering questions from professionals who wanted to implement similar detection protocols in their jurisdictions. But the conversation that mattered most came during the coffee break. A young insurance investigator approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Cameron, my grandmother died last year under circumstances very similar to what you described. I never thought to question it because the doctors said her heart just gave out. But after hearing your presentation..." "Trust your instincts," I told her. "Professional expertise isn't just about catching fraud after it happens. It's about preventing it from happening to others." 6 months later, that young investigator's grandmother's case was reopened. They discovered a network of corrupt healthcare providers who'd been systematically targeting elderly patients for insurance fraud. 8 people were arrested, and dozens of families got justice for their loved ones. That's the real legacy of my experience. Not revenge against Michael Cameron, but the knowledge that professional expertise, when properly applied, can protect countless people from becoming victims. Today, I serve on the boards of 3 organizations: the National Healthcare Fraud Prevention Alliance, the Insurance Industry Ethics Committee, and the Vulnerable Adults Protection Initiative. I also established the Cameron Foundation for Healthcare Fraud Education, which provides training to medical professionals, insurance investigators, and family members on recognizing and preventing systematic healthcare abuse. But perhaps most importantly, I've learned to share my story not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the power of professional expertise and community support. Every month, I receive emails from families who've used the warning signs I've published to protect their loved ones from similar schemes. Adult children who've intervened when elderly parents were being manipulated. Spouses who've recognized patterns of systematic financial abuse. Healthcare workers who've reported suspicious patterns they might otherwise have missed. Your inner wisdom matters. The expertise you've developed through decades of life and professional experience isn't just valuable, it's potentially life-saving. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Ask questions when professionals rush you toward decisions. Verify independently when family members suddenly change financial arrangements. Document everything when medical diagnoses appear overnight. And remember that evil often disguises itself as care, but professional competence and community support can expose even the most sophisticated deceptions. The hardest lesson I learned about people is that trust, once broken, changes you forever. But it also taught me that expertise, once earned, becomes a responsibility to protect others. If my story resonates with your experience, you're not alone. And if you've developed professional expertise through your own life journey, remember that it might be exactly what someone else needs to survive their darkest moment. Your wisdom matters, your experience has value, and your inner strength is probably much greater than you realize. Trust yourself. You know more than you think you do.